everyone, and welcome to a little experiment we're calling #TalkDaredevil. This is a podcast that we're doing as members of the team for Save Daredevil, or #SaveDaredevil. And we're going to be talking about a bunch of different topics that are related to the campaign and the show and what the future holds and all of that. So it'll be a rotating roster of team members. And so today we have moi, I'm Christine, and I'll let the other two people who are with me introduce themselves.
I'm Phyllis. You may have seen me on one of the team videos or maybe a few of the videos from Save Daredevil Con. But yeah, I'm really excited to get talking about some Save Daredevil stuff.
And I'm Sam. You probably saw me in the Animal Crossing videos. I was the one hosting there, so I'm also some of the meetups. Probably a lot of people know me from those.
Yeah. And people might know me from, I was also in a panel for Save Daredevil Con. I was on the fan conversation panel talking to Kulji from MenWithoutFear.com, and we had Emma from Daresplaining, and then we had Joshua from Jamie and Joshua Do Daredevil. So I also blog at theothermurderpapers.com, which is a blog that hasn't really been active much lately. I've spent so much time with all these lovely people from the Save Daredevil team, so that's where I spend most of my time these days. But so we're just going to have some fun talking about kind of the general state of the campaign, I guess, state of like where we are right now and what happened almost 2 years ago and where we're heading. So yeah. So what else can we expect from this show or this podcast going forward?
There's a few things that we're going to have, depending on how this goes. You know, again, as Christine said, this is kind of an experiment for us. Maybe we all kind of got bitten by the bug a little bit during the con. And, you know, now we don't mind getting together to chat a little bit more. But, you know, in addition to today kind of being about the state of the campaign, we're also going to be talking more in depth about the changes that some of you may have heard at Disney, and as far as their plans kind of in this post-COVID world with Disney Plus, and there are other original content. And we're also going to be talking really more in depth about what we have planned kind of as we hit the 2-year mark and beyond, because, you know, a big thing that we'll get into on this conversation is, you know, we've been working towards this November 2020 deadline, and that isn't going to be the end of this campaign. That might, in a way, be the beginning. So we really want to have a space for us as team members on this campaign to talk a little bit more openly with the fans about what we're thinking about and what we want to do, and also just share kind of our own opinions and perspectives on this whole situation and kind of be a part of the fan conversation, which we imagine will only get hopefully louder as we get closer to the end date of the Netflix moratorium.
Yeah. And also for anyone out there who is like new to the campaign, or maybe you just like finished watching Daredevil. I actually talked to a friend today who is now on like episode 8 of season 3 for the first time. So, and he's like, this is the best season yet. I'm like, yes, I know. But if you're in that category, or you watched it a couple of years ago and are kind of new to the campaign, we're hoping that this first episode is also going to be sort of a good kind of recap of what happened back then and like all the kind of complexities involved.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So what happened? November 29th, 2018. What do you remember?
2018 sounds like it was ages ago.
I know.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, the cancellation in itself feels like it's something, I think if you're a fan of the show and you're like at all aware of the existence of this campaign, you probably knew that the show got canceled 2 years ago, and you knew that the Save Daredevil campaign sprung up in the wake of that. But something that maybe the casual majority doesn't know or isn't as aware of are the circumstances of the cancellation. So this could be a good time for us to sort of break that down and recap it even a little bit for fans who might not have been as plugged in over these last nearly 2 years.
Yeah. And there was a lot of early kind of, people had all kinds of ideas that Disney did it, and Disney did it because Disney Plus was coming, and all kinds of just misunderstanding around the kind of what happened.
That kind of started with Iron Fist, to be honest, because back then, like, people were, Iron Fist isn't that good, but then, like, Luke Cage got canceled, and I remember there were a lot of, like, rumors going around, like, they are going to make, like, Daughters of the Dragon, or they are going to make Heroes for Hire, and, like, people were expecting, like, the cancellation to lead to something else, not to, like, they are canceled and that's it.
Yeah. And the fact that Luke Cage got canceled on the day Daredevil season 3 premiered was sort of a very like, ooh, what's going on, and so yeah, the narrative at that time, especially with two shows canceled very closely together right before and as Daredevil was premiering, I think kind of set into motion a lot of like fandom conspiracy theories and sort of rumors. Over top of that, there was this whole dynamic with Disney pushing into the streaming wars with Disney Plus. Very well-known kind of disillusion of that agreement between Disney and Netflix to distribute their movies, which kind of got lumped into the whole Marvel TV thing. So, we have a whole, if you're new to us and you haven't been to our website, we have a whole excellent FAQ page that touches on a lot of this at SaveDaredevil.com/FAQ. But yeah, it's just, I think it's a little wild still, like sitting here and thinking back to it and thinking about it, like just how complicated the whole thing is. And a lot of it has to do with Netflix, I think, creating really a complicated situation for shows that end up getting canceled on their platform.
Yeah, they've really gone, just as, I've had Netflix since the very beginning, or at least since it first came to, I'm in Sweden, and as soon as it came to Sweden, I got Netflix. I even used to, back when I lived in the States a few years ago, I was one of those who had, like, when Netflix was something that was, you got a DVD, like a subscription kind of thing. So I remember Netflix from way back when. But I remember in the beginning, they were almost, right now they're in a situation where a lot of shows are being canceled, and a lot of shows are being canceled in ways that a lot of fans are like, whoa, this is super premature. It's happening on a cliffhanger. And we can get into why that is, or and so on. But I remember in the beginning, it was almost the opposite. Like they would just, renew everything, even the stuff that I thought was kind of like, wasn't all that great. So, it's normal for obviously a streamer or even traditional TV to occasionally cancel a show, but they wouldn't cancel anything. And then they went from that to like canceling a lot of stuff, which is where we are right now. And it's kind of, but in that sense, 3 apparently seems to be the magic number for how many seasons are allowed on Netflix, we've been told.
Yeah, it really has to do a lot with Netflix. At a certain point, I would probably say it was like maybe kind of 2017, 2018 felt like this inflection point for Netflix, because I know this is on our website somewhere written down, but just the number of original series that premiered from 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, it, like, the way it just multiplied and skyrocketed up, it's like insane if you compare the amount of programming they had in 2015 compared to what they launched in 2019. And part of the reason why their business model has now shifted from let's renew everything, no matter what it is, to, okay, we're going to start killing all your darlings, is because, there is now this shift because they have in their own, they were smart in that they were the first ones out there, and they got their hooks into this area of the industry that a lot of the studios and networks are now playing catch up on. But, they are the leader now. They get to call the shots. And one of the things that they didn't get to call the shots on before necessarily was owning all of their own content. And now there's this shift from working with outside studios, third-party networks, to help distribute their content, to producing as much of their own IP in-house that they can own just forever, essentially. So when you see shows like Anne with an E, One Day at a Time, Daredevil, all these shows got canceled around at the 3-season mark because there is an actual, within the Netflix business model, once you hit season 3, you need to start paying. I think it's more back ends. I don't want to speak too much about this because I can't remember the specifics, but maybe Sam, do you remember?
I think I do. I think it was Deadline that reported about this, if I remember correctly. So the thing is, like, for like the Netflix model allows people, like the producers, to make really cheap seasons 1, 2, and 3. But like in each season, the quantity they are paying, like the producers, the actors, and like the whole team is increasing. But from season 1 to season 2, the increase is not as big. And from season 2 to season 3 is just like moderate. But after season 3, this is like when the premiums really kick in and they have to pay all the actors and everybody much more. So this is when it becomes almost unsustainable for them to have these shows, like, because the amount of people they need them to watch just becomes like too crazy. So sometimes I remember seeing like, oh, they didn't have enough viewers. But the thing is not also like, oh, how many people are watching it, but also like how many people they need to watch it in order to like renew this. So it's not like nobody's watching it. It's just like the amount of money they need to make a season 4, let's say, is too crazy for them to continue. Yeah. And it makes more sense for Netflix just to cancel it and start something new that is way cheaper.
Yeah, and the other thing to piggyback off that is that Netflix, unlike a traditional network that's driven by advertisers, they're driven by new subscribers. So by that, by that kind of that thinking leads to, well, a show with more seasons that is older and maybe not of the zeitgeist is just not going to draw in as many new subscribers as the new shiny thing that we can push out and promote and do it more cheaply and et cetera, so, I understand the economics of it, but also it's just it's a tough time to be a fan of TV, especially if the TV is on Netflix. And, the other thing that, to kind of go back to the cancellation thing, another thing that we've learned is very traditional in the context of a Netflix cancellation are the non-competes. Right. Pretty much every show that we've read about having been canceled by Netflix, they haven't been able to get a seller or a buyer for their show, not in the way that if you got a show canceled at CBS, maybe you could shop it to a different network. Netflix just won't let you sell your show because they own those rights, both the rights of the show and then the rights of the distribution, which makes it obviously very difficult for any show to maintain enough momentum to go to a new platform or to a new network and then be able to continue the story. It's no surprise that out of all the canceled shows, you've only ever heard of one show, which I believe is One Day at a Time, having had gotten picked up again. And only after a lot of struggling and fighting with Netflix. So,
But this is like, I remember you said like Netflix owns the shows and like the distribution, right? But that's only for like the Netflix produced shows.
Yes. Yeah.
Not for stuff like this third party, like is the case of Daredevil.
Yeah.
Or a lot of other stuff.
Yeah, it's a little bit different with Daredevil, which is also, puts us in a kind of particular situation where, of course, they don't own the IP because Marvel owns the IP. And but what would you say to people who are saying, because we hear this a lot, that Netflix owns the shows.
Netflix doesn't. Netflix doesn't own the shows.
They don't.
Yeah. They have distributions, right? And that's what it is. And it's a very different thing. To be specific, they have the streaming distribution rights. We actually don't know if Netflix has, for example, the linear TV distributions right. Those are probably
linear TV being like your traditional broadcast and cable networks. And also what they do, so where the non-compete comes in for Daredevil is essentially Netflix has a moratorium on the usage of the IP. So this is a very interesting situation because, you know, Marvel IP is extremely valuable. There's a reason why Sony will literally never let go of the IP that they have, because that stuff makes a lot of money for them. And so, you know, unlike maybe a traditional non-compete, in this situation, Disney, Marvel, they're just not allowed to use those characters. They're not allowed to use their own IP, essentially, in anything that's not a Netflix production for 2 years. So that's when you hear us talk about like 2-year moratoriums or a 2-year cooling period. That's specifically what we're talking about. That was something that was brought into light pretty soon after the cancellation in December. I think it was in a Variety article. But yeah, you know, we sort of knew from those early days, like, okay, there is like a very clear contractual ticking clock, which is why, you know, in it, we can talk about this a little bit more in depth too, but just how that has affected kind of how we chose to run the campaign and, you know, how we've ran it since.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about what Netflix is doing and what their reasoning is and everything. But what about Disney? Did they play any part in the cancellation? And that's what a lot of people are saying. And we're saying, no, that's not how it was. But so what was it like?
Sam, I know you have thoughts.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about this. So, because this is a very complicated issue, because obviously, like, Disney is a competitive of Netflix right now, and they announced that, and like, obviously, like, there's going to be bad waters between both sides. But the thing is that back in 2018, when Disney announced their plans with Disney Plus and like to take away the movies and everything, Netflix actually renewed some of the shows. They announced a new season for The Punisher. They announced a new season for Jessica Jones. And they were, from what we know, like what has been said, like they were in talks about a new season with Luke Cage. And that's like when things seems to have gone south. I don't know what that was about. Like none of us probably will ever know what that was about. But like for me, if Disney Plus was a major issue for Netflix at that point, they will have just like canceled all the shows back when they announced Disney Plus, like not like almost a year after.
Yeah, it's true.
And like for Disney, it also makes no sense, in my opinion, because like right now they can't use the characters. They are not getting anything from that IPs and everything. And like whatever you say, these are still their IPs. And if people were watching it in Netflix, that also benefits them.
Yeah, a lot of people are thinking that it was sort of like, oh no, it was canceled because it was going to be an automatically moved to Disney Plus and everything, and of course that's not the case. But on the other hand, like you mentioned, with Disney Plus being announced, a lot of things changed in the sort of streaming media landscape between the time when these shows were first announced back in like 2014, maybe it was even earlier than that. Anyway, I mean, Daredevil debuted in 2015. And then between then and 2018, a lot of things happened. But at the same time, I mean, everyone has been speaking about this, have been really, both on honestly, the Netflix side and the Disney/Marvel side, have been clear about that the cancellation decision is, at the end of the day, that's going to be Netflix. So
yeah, I think it's helpful for people to remember that in this equation, like Netflix is the network. So just as like a show is on ABC or Fox or NBC, the network is the one that decides whether or not they're going to renew. So it was the same situation with Netflix. And, you know, for the longest time, there was still no reason for them to not continue greenlighting a show that was of using very valuable IP and still very popular with a large chunk of their viewing audience. So, you know, now we're here where we are.
But this is really like such a messy situation with everything. Like we really don't know what happened there. Like what was the really driving force to cancel all these shows? Maybe it was like, we suspect it was money because of the 3-season marks, right? But I also know, like back then there were rumors that maybe they were like in discussions with Disney. So I think ultimately, like what happened with these shows is just like the streaming war happened. It just wasn't profitable neither for Netflix nor Disney to continue on the agreement they had, and none of the part could, like, agree on something new.
Yeah. So. And unfortunately, the Marvel TV universe on Netflix was collateral damage.
Yeah.
In kind of a corporate, the corporate streaming wars. But yeah, I know we've kind of gone into sort of a long explanation of all that, but it really lays the foundation for everything that we've chosen to do as a campaign. That's a big reason why we've always pushed that kind of 2-year mantra and why we've made the choices that we've made. Because again, we were never a traditional Save Our Show campaign, a lot of Save Our Show campaigns. And we've been able to connect to a few really great ones. And their fight was very brief, or they kind of worked to a point where the answer was very clear, that there was just no way of the behind the scenes brokering and the relationships between the studios and the networks and such. It just wasn't going to pan out, Yeah. In our situation, that was obviously different.
Yeah. It's been very different. And I mean, everything that's happened also on the sort of Disney/Marvel side with Marvel Television and everything, which I guess we can get into. But like you're saying, a lot of other shows are going to know pretty soon whether it's going to be, whether it's futile or whether it's actually going to work. And of course, some shows have been saved through fan campaigns. Yeah. So, I mean, they really do help. But I mean, we're in a very, like we said, it's a special situation with the 2-year thing. And we've been able to do it for this long and we'll do it for, as long as it takes, or, as long as there's any kind of news.
And that's kind of the thing, right? Because for us, like, there's just no realistic situation where we get news before the IP rights fully revert back to Marvel, right? So everything that we've really done kind of over these nearly 2 years has been to really maintain like interest and awareness and just like not treading water doesn't sound like the best term for this, but we know just to maintain some level of enthusiasm for the show until we could get to those 2 years. Because 2 years is a long time for all of us. When we started this campaign back in 2018, which was like 100 years ago, it felt like it was going to be a really long road ahead. Obviously, though, we've gotten to this point where we are like within less than 3 months now of that due date, deadline, whatever you call it. Right. It'll be up. So at that point, anything we do after that could have a measurable impact on, what Disney or Marvel decide to do, We just want to make sure we're keeping Daredevil in their thoughts.
And honestly, I'm impressed also by how much, not just a campaign, but also like interest in Daredevil has been in the news. And I mean, there are a lot of, if you're familiar with a campaign, you're also familiar with how careful we are not to put out bad information. And there's a lot of kind of rumor type stuff out there, which isn't, it's going to just be confusing for all the fans, but it at least speaks to the interest there still is in this show. Just how often it's still talked about, in the news and what the future might hold and everything. And I think that's, even when it's, really just rumors, it's still kind of encouraging that there's a demand for the show, which is really obvious.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And you can see that especially like, I'm sorry about this, but like in comparison with the other shows, like you don't hear that much about them, like, oh, we're going to be reviving this or that, even with other canceled shows. But like, I feel like there's a new rumor about Daredevil every other week.
It's true.
Yeah, and a lot of them keep being recycled every other week too. It's like, we're back to this one again. Yeah. So it's kind of, we've seen them all at this point, I think.
Yeah, we have.
But like that, the rumors can be frustrating for those of us in the campaign. But at the same time, it is in its own way a sort of proof that hey, people aren't ready to let Daredevil go.
No.
It's obviously very encouraging.
Which is very encouraging. Obviously, people might have different opinions on how they want to see Daredevil come back. But I think there's nearly unanimous, if not just unanimous, agreement that Charlie needs to come back as Daredevil. Like, it makes zero sense for Marvel to bench Daredevil beyond this 2-year moratorium. It just doesn't make any sense to the fans. It doesn't make any sense as a business decision.
Especially like in the middle of COVID, where like they're bleeding money, and like you see that there's a push like to get like the Fox IPs they got back integrated into the bigger picture. So I don't feel like they're going to just bench also like a very popular character right now. Like this is like a moment where Disney will be like, okay, we have to use everything we have in our arsenal, and Daredevil is a powerful character, so I don't think they will bench him for long.
Yeah, it would really make sense. I mean, of course, coming from this campaign and being big fans of the show and everything, of course, we want to see it in our light. But I mean, even so, I do think it would be, considering all of the, stalled production that we're looking at right now with COVID and everything, if they really wanted to grab something semi, like, I don't want to say off the rack, or off the shelf, but I mean, if they wanted to quickly move into production on something that would be sort of kind of ready to go and is already super popular and has a big fan base. I mean, hey, Daredevil would be perfect for that. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's been something interesting, kind of how 2020 has upended everybody's life, in significant ways, but it's been interesting to see how it's impacted our campaign compared to last year. Last year, if you kind of want to get an idea of what we've done, we actually have a great page on our website at SaveDaredevil.com/timeline that goes through kind of all the initiatives we've come up with and maintained kind of through these past nearly 2 years. But, last year we were so lucky in that we were able to do a lot of stuff in person, a lot of stuff with fans, a lot of the stuff we could send straight to executives and offices. All of that stuff is off the table for this year. We don't know when people will be back in their office. We don't know if people will be back in their office for the remainder of 2020. So something like a writing initiative kind of doesn't hit the same as it did last year, when we knew, hey, we have addresses and we can send a box to, this building, and hopefully somebody will see it. In this environment, we've had to pivot a lot toward going digital, doing a lot of online content versus sort of tangible stuff, in the form of meetups or in the form of letters or. So yeah, but kind of on the flip side of that, sort of the drawbacks of 2020 in, all productions have been shut down. A lot of stuff has kind of been stopped in its tracks. Could be that silver lining for our campaign. It might be a little bit weird to say that, but it is kind of true.
So do we want to maybe mention a little bit about all the stuff that's happened kind of at Disney Marvel? Or like in terms of the organizational structure of those companies?
Oh yeah, I mean the 2019, late 2019 into 2020 was kind of there were lots of shifts for Marvel and Disney. Obviously Disney had their big thing last year, kind of in the spring, right, where they finalized their purchase of Fox, which huge deal. That kind of reshifted sort of the corporate umbrella and sort of the executive chain a little bit for us. But kind of as we went from 2019 to 2020, especially with all the cancellations of the Netflix shows and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. coming to an end, Marvel TV basically was disbanded, which is, kind of a big deal for us. And whatever was remaining of the TV operations was absorbed into Marvel Studios. We also saw Kevin Feige get promoted to Chief Creative Officer of Marvel at large. Another kind of huge shift that hadn't played into our calculus before, what was it, late last year? So, between kind of the overarching changes of just the dynamics of this year, plus the changes and the shifting dynamics of the corporate structure that we're dealing with our show and our cancellation, it's been a lot to adapt to.
Yeah.
I think that also has like brought a lot of confusion, not only like with the fandom, also like even in the campaign. Like I remember we like we used to scratch our head, like trying to figure out like what's going on at Marvel, what's going on at Disney, because it's just like a lot of people were going in and out, and there was a lot of shift. And but I think that also like helped with the rumors and all that, because nobody kind of knew what the hell was going on.
Yeah, we've had to like update all the people we need to send stuff to at various points. So it's like, okay, so who's the new boss of this, and like why is this person interesting? Like of interest for us to send something to or get in touch with.
So many new bosses.
Yeah. So at least like I think everyone involved has kind of been getting like a mini sort of like education and like how the television companies structure or what that looks like and how things run and who does what and everything. So it's been illuminating.
I know we've become like accidental media / industry scholars almost.
But we've always been talking about, or very early on, we kind of settled on, I mean, Disney Plus is going to, obviously has this sort of family type, programming, branding associated with it. And they've been very, they've always been pointing that out to people that it's going to be, family oriented. So we've been kind of, ever since the early days, been sort of suggesting that Hulu would be a good home for Daredevil.
Maybe you want to speak a little bit about like the changes and strategies we have like approached, because like it's been a wild ride, like just in terms of planning stuff for the campaign. I don't know, like I think you mentioned it already a bit of like us having to figure out who was in charge of something, and like just being very flexible on what is coming, and like, okay, this is no longer the case with Fins, so let's try this. Like I think we have been really good at doing that too.
Yeah,
I think we've had a good mix of initiatives that focused on engaging with the studios, and then initiatives that engaged with the fandom. Because again, it's been this delicate balance of you just can't do everything you want to do before those 2 years are up. Like we could certainly do a lot more if we wanted to. And I know that maybe some fans have wondered why we haven't done more of X, Y, and Z. But the fact of the matter is, you don't want to kind of shoot off all this momentum at like the 12-month mark when you have 12 more months to go. More importantly for us, I think a big part of why the campaign has continued for as long as it has is because of fandom buy-in. Like the fans have to feel like what we're doing is has a purpose, that we're doing it for the right reasons, that they agree with the reasons for why we're maintaining this campaign. So if we don't engage the fans and we just worry about flooding like tweets with like hashtags all day, it could work for some people, but that approach has never really rang true for us, just because it wouldn't have maintained us for as long as the initiatives that we did get off the ground have. So there is a reason why
pacing is everything. Pacing, pacing really is everything, because like you said, you don't want to kind of burn out too soon, and when you've got 24 months of stuff to do. So it's like you kind of want to remain visible. You don't want the powers that be to forget about us at any point. You want to be sort of like, hey, we're still here. But at the same time, like people, including us and everybody involved, like you need to set a pace that's maintainable for the long haul. Otherwise, you're just going to
we would just all burn out. We would have all burned out at like 3 months, let alone 12 or 18 months, So, hopefully that's some insight for people who might wonder. And you know what? Like if you're listening to this and you're still wondering, you should reach out to us on social media and like ask us these questions. We'd love to kind of share more of our perspective. And again, that's why this whole experiment exists. But I guess that might be a good segue to what do we have kind of coming up immediately? Where are we at right now in August 2020? And I think for us, is really looking at that kind of, again, it's this like just shy of 3 month window that we have left, and really trying to use it as impactfully as we can, while balancing out sort of this kind of this reworked environment that we are dealing with COVID-19.
Yeah, I mean, one thing we want to go back to a little bit is to get some, more signatures for the petition. That's something that we had a lot of names added to in the beginning of the campaign. It's currently at, I think, 360,000 and change. So it would be wonderful to get some more names there. So we're going to try and devise some, targeted ads for Facebook and also to take it a little bit more international, see which kinds of markets we haven't really targeted before and stuff. So, I mean, Daredevil has a lot of fans in a lot of countries. So we're going to do that. And also we're doing some more international outreach as well and trying to look for sort of ambassadors in different countries that we could join up with and who could help us sort of carry this message into other sort of language markets and everything. So that's one thing we're doing.
Yeah. Another thing that we kind of want to try to push, obviously, with our time winding down is just getting people back on that hashtag and talking on the SaveDaredevil hashtag, tagging Kevin Feige, Marvel Studios, Disney, Hulu. We'll probably end up announcing something kind of probably after this goes up, but definitely before we actually get it started. Just like a monthly hashtag party. We're not too worried about trending, but we really want to get people back in the habit of making conversation and making their voices heard so that by the time we do hit November 29, 2020, we want people to be as loud as possible. So, so if you're hearing this now, the rough plan is to be posting on the 29th of the month until we get to November 29th. Mm-hmm. So keep that in mind. And in addition to that, we don't want to give up on all the fan engagement that we've done a really good job with. Hopefully you were around when we did Save Daredevil Con back in July. And if you haven't, all that content can be found on our YouTube channel and and through our website. But with New York Comic Con going virtual, just as San Diego did in October, hopefully we'll be able to pull together some content for that too. Maybe not as big and as crazy as we went for July. We need to maybe conserve some resources as we get into November. But yeah, that's also something to look forward to. I
hope we're gonna have a lot of fun together with the fans going into the home stretch, and hopefully we'll create a lot of noise.
Yeah. And, again, we know that the fandom spans a pretty broad spectrum. Either you've been following us since day one and you're totally bought in, or you're a fan of Daredevil, but maybe you're not completely on board with the campaign. But regardless, we have the fact that this moratorium ends at the end of November. And, whether or not you've bought in before, hey, let's, as fans of Daredevil, as Marvel fans, as fans of just excellent superhero genre TV, let's get together and let's just give it one big last shot to really make our voices heard in a unified way. We will talk about this more, but we do have plans for Save Daredevil past November 29th. An interesting point that came up in our planning with the team is that kind of there's everything that came before November 29th, which we've always kind of sort of preface with, hey, there's really not much Marvel can do. There's not much Disney can say until we hit this point. But, after we hit that point, whatever we do or say could have an impact. And so we are going to continue to make plans for the campaign beyond that. And we're going to hope that 2021 is just better on all counts than 2020.
Yes. Yes,
but
please,
hopefully that's going to be a conversation that we have kind of on its own too, about what you can expect from the campampaigne past these 3 months that we just talked about.
But that's a funny point that you bring up, because you mentioned 2021, and I have been receiving messages from my friends, Daredevil friends and stuff, and they're like, okay, the 2 mark is up. I know some people might expect okay, it's going to be the day after the 2 years we get an announcement, but nope. I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Especially because November, is the end of November. That's really close to just the holidays. Yeah. So Disney people will be busy by then.
Yeah, that is a great reminder for the fans, that Kevin Feige will not be jumping out of a cake on November 30th with a Daredevil renewal announcement. All we know is that once the moratorium is up, using the characters again is fair game. Mm-hmm. We will have floated a lot of great ideas by them via the campaign. Yeah. Obviously, they know how to do their job and they do their job well. And we hope that they take into serious consideration what bringing back Daredevil would mean, not just for the fans, but for Marvel itself. But this stuff takes time. Again, a reminder that everything literally paused for almost 6 months. We're starting to hear about productions getting back on the ground. The MCU Disney Plus shows, I think, are slowly starting to start filming again, kind of maybe, if not this month, next month or October. But these are shows that got delayed from starting this winter and this spring. So no matter where they are in the process of planning or development, studios, they will not announce things until there is something concrete to announce. So just temper your expectations.
I think another thing to keep in mind in regards to that is that the whole 2-year moratorium has been pretty, for what we understand about it, has been pretty strict about what you're allowed and not allowed to do within the 2 years. And it's really sort of, the sense we've been getting is that you're not, you're barely even allowed to even mention the idea of something new within the 2-year window. Of course, you could have people, sort of sketch something on a napkin. See where I did there? Napkin. You could have, people sketch something on a napkin pretty much, or have people toss around ideas in a room, but you're not really allowed to go from there to anything really more concrete than that until after the 2 years is up. So there would have to be a lot of, I think, other things that are a little bit more concrete that would also need to happen before they could announce anything. And a lot of those steps are going to also have to wait until the 2-year moratorium is up. So that's another thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, agreed.
In short, basically, the real fight starts after the 2 years moratorium. This is when Marvel can actually start doing things. When the voices of the fans are the most important. This is when okay, what are we going to do with Daredevil? And then that's when they are going to turn into, okay, what's the demand for Daredevil? What are the Daredevil fans asking for? And what is out there? So 2 years is not the end of the fight, but actually the real beginning.
In a sense, this is where we're sort of turning into a regular Save Our Show campaign.
Yes. 2 years later.
Yeah, this has been a 2-year pre-party.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, I think that's probably a great place for us to start wrapping up. Obviously, our hope is that we're going to be able to record a few more of these conversations and kind of go in depth on a few of the topics that we brought up during this conversation. And, we hope that you enjoyed what you heard. We'd love to kind of hear your feedback once this actually goes out into the world. So you'll probably see this on our YouTube. You might see this in other places where podcasts can be found. So fingers crossed, we're still kind of working that out. But, when you do see us, drop us some comments, hit us up on social media. We are at SaveDaredevil on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube, but we are at Renew Daredevil on Twitter. So, hopefully we did a good job, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope they enjoyed this.
Yep.
Yeah. See you out there on the battlefield.
Yes, everybody.
Yes.
Thank you, Fandom Without Fear.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.